What are some not so fun facts? These answers are from AskReddit, but let me know if you have any not so fun facts down below in the comments as well. And subscribe. First up, for generations, the indigenous people of South America used blow darts laced with paralytic plant extract to hunt their prey. In the 1800s, English physicians who interacted with these indigenous South Americans recognized the possible uses of the paralytic agent, now known as tubocurarine, as an anesthetic agent for surgeries. Physicians noticed that animals under the influence of tubocurarine would become temporarily immobilized but would recover after a period of paralysis. According to these physicians, this discovery would revolutionize surgery as an anesthetic agent. So confident were they in their discovery that one of the physicians volunteered to undergo surgery under the influence of this to demonstrate its effectiveness. Unfortunately, he failed to realize that although the drug was an effective paralyzing agent, it did not have any effect on the sensory receptors of the body, so he felt every cut of the surgery without being able to move or do anything about it. And this is from the MCAT biology book, apparently. One of the books you use to study for the MCAT, which is the exam you take to get into medical school. That's got to be one of the worst possible things that could happen to any human being. It's almost like being buried alive, but in this case, you feel everything. If you guys have ever seen Tales from the Crypt, I think there was an episode about this exact thing where the guy was paralyzed but he could feel everything. Next up is a fact about elephants. When another elephant dies, its pack makes a little funeral for it. They pick up rocks and put it around the body and stand there for a while before they keep going. Male bedbugs impregnate female bedbugs by penetrating the female's abdomen with their hypodermic dick, meaning that it goes under the skin, hypo beneath dermic skin of the female abdomen. The smell of vomit comes from butyric acid, as does the smell of Parmesan cheese. When given a sample of butyric acid to smell, test subjects were either disgusted or pleased, depending on whether they were told it was puke or Parmesan cheese. During an inspection in 2015, the TSA missed 96% of contraband. I can't believe they would miss 96% of everything when everything is running through those x-ray machines and they pull people aside and check inside their bag, but somehow I guess they missed the vast majority of everything according to this. In order to remove a human ear, it takes roughly 8 pounds of force. That just makes me think of Diablo 2. When you fight somebody and then you take their ear, it takes 8 pounds of force. Horses can't throw up. If they need to throw up, they'll die. Armadillos can carry leprosy and pass to humans just by being in proximity. If you've never seen leprosy, like the biblical leprosy, it is horrible. And a lot of times disease can't pass from animals to humans other than the really popular examples we know about. But somebody added here that most humans are immune to leprosy now and very little armadillos carry it. Still, you don't want to go around touching armadillos. Next up, if you shine a flashlight on a newborn sea turtle for too long, which could only be even a few minutes, it will start crawling around in circles. This is known as the ring of death. It means that the turtle's eyesight has been permanently damaged due to mistaking your lights for the moon that guides it to the sea. By doing this, you have doomed the sea turtle to the death ring right after birth. And according to this guy, this information is from the Sea Turtle Preservation Society in India Atlantic, Florida, from one of their presentations. So I guess Xbox 360 isn't the only one that has a ring of death. Crabs eat their babies and sloths can die from starvation with a full stomach. And as a follow-up, apparently a lot of sloths also die because when they're swinging through the trees, they grab their other arm instead of another branch and fall to their death. There's a whale that's named 52 Blue who sings at a strange frequency, so strange that he's unable to communicate with other whales. Someone added that there was an Octonauts program about it, and they actually made him a special translator, so he lives happily ever after. Gingivitis is contagious. If you have a collapsed lung, even once it's resolved, you can never go scuba diving again. There's a 1 in 3 chance it will happen again within 12 months. When it comes to heart disease, the very first symptom in roughly 1/3 of all cases is sudden death. Meaning you could be perfectly healthy and drop dead because you had heart disease and didn't know it. This one is sad, and I've heard people talk about this a lot over the years, but the original voice actor for Ducky in the Land Before Time series was murdered by her father, and then the father torched her body. I believe her tombstone has Ducky on it, as well as one of her lines from the movie. And that actress is also the one who did the voice for Anne Marie in All Dogs Go to Heaven. Criminals that are considered unattractive usually receive 50% longer jail time than attractive criminals. Brain aneurysms can happen at any time in your life and you won't know it until it's too late or if a doctor accidentally finds it. There's actually a first-hand story about this where someone said, my cousin had his first brain aneurysm at 23 years old in 2003. The week prior, he complained of headaches. He was taking a hot shower and collapsed. Made a flight to the hospital and the doctors operated on the brain and managed to save him. Told us he would be like a little kid for the rest of his life. But he managed to pull a full recovery within 5 years. He learned to walk/talk again, everything. It was amazing and unimaginable at the same time. Only reminder was a scar on his head. He had his second and fatal brain aneurysm in his sleep at age 36 in 2016. This time there were no symptoms. He was always living on borrowed time. We're just glad we got an additional 13 years with him before he left us for good. Some whales, when old, no longer have enough strength to swim for as long, so if they swim too deep, they might not have enough strength to swim back up to get air, so they end up drowning. And there's a clarification that it's technically not drowning, they instead suffocate from the lack of air. This is apparently because whales have to manually breathe instead of it being done automatically. Babies can die after consuming honey. The botulinum toxin, like the one in Botox, will paralyze their muscles, causing floppy baby syndrome. And to clarify, the bacterial spores, basically a super resistant sleepy form of the microbe, are in the honey, not the actual toxin. After going into the human, they start the party and begin to produce the toxin. Some dogs have to get their anal glands squeezed by veterinarians or their owners if too much fluid gets stuck in them. Dogs usually help themselves with the issue though by pooing or rubbing their butts on the floor. And if your dog isn't the type that drags their butt on the carpet to let you know things are getting backed up, the glands can abscess and explode. Then for a few weeks it looks like your dog has two butts. An estimated 60% of heart attacks are painless. There's a plant in Australia called the gimpy tree that has hairs all over it that are small enough and are compared to hypodermic needles. Whenever a person touches the plant, these hairs stick into your skin and inject a toxin. This causes the affected area to be covered in acid and feels like it's set on fire. And what makes it worse is that pain lasts for months to years. Apparently there's a story that a lot of people know where a guy used this thing for toilet paper and ended up not being able to handle the pain anymore. Japan used to use prisoners to test how many bodies their swords were. They would stack prisoners on top of each other, and however many bodies a sword went through was how many bodies the sword was. You can die from Alzheimer's due to the brain forgetting how to swallow or breathe. The sun occasionally lets out supermassive bursts of plasma energy called coronal mass ejections. These could knock out our satellites, power grid, and internet for decades if it caught us off guard. One barely missed us in 2012, and another has about a 10% chance of happening in the next 10 years. People have heard that we can prepare ahead of time by shutting down electricity for a few days when the strike hits. So people may be without power for a few days, but it won't destroy the infrastructure if we do this, supposedly. This next one is about coal fire plants. You may have heard on several occasions that coal fire plants release more radiation than nuclear plants, and it's true, but the reason why is a bit disturbing. Nuclear power plants are a closed system, so whatever radiation that comes from it has to punch its way through several tons of steel and concrete. Coal fire plants are not closed systems. They dig stuff out of the ground and burn it, releasing all the waste into the air. Coal goes through very minimal processing before it's burned compared to other sources of fuel. After it is dug, the coal is washed and mostly gets rid of its impurities such as sulfur and rocks of various minerals. However, there always remains a trace of impurities, and those impurities can be made up of naturally occurring radioactive elements such as radium. The presence of radium in coal is usually in very small trace amounts, but when a coal fire plant burns 9,000 tons of coal every day, it adds up, which means it releases more radiation than a nuclear power plant, and it's more dangerous because that radiation is coming from particles that are just out there floating in the air, which you can inhale. If you guys have ever watched the Chernobyl HBO show, that's obviously not a coal fire plant, but you see how horrifying the effects of radiation can really be. It's way worse than probably most people think if they haven't looked into that or thought about it. For any of you that ride a motorcycle, apparently you are roughly 30 times more likely to die in a motorcycle accident than a car accident. This factors in the odds of being in an accident per mile and the odds of the accident being a fatality. The Spanish flu was one of the most lethal pandemics in history. People who caught it bled from their ears, experienced nausea and extreme fear. Their skin turned shades of blue and experienced extreme pain from the slightest touch. It caused internal hemorrhaging. 18 to 35-year-old adults' immune systems, which would typically be considered the strongest, would react so strongly that their bodies would fill up with antibodies and fluid, literally drowning the infected with their own defense mechanism. That specific line had a clarification from someone saying a more accurate version of it with the comment, 29-year-olds had by far the highest death rate, but go older or younger by 10 years and the death rates are similar to other bad flu seasons. What made the 1919 Spanish flu so deadly to those specifically born around 1889 was actually the 1889 flu strain. If this was the first flu strain you were exposed to as a young child, those antibodies stayed with you. If it was those specific antibodies that went into overdrive against the 1919 strain, in effect, people died from the 1919 flu because the 1889 flu had been in their first flu strain. This effect was predicted and seen again in Hong Kong in the 60s. Interestingly enough, it was also seen in Canada in 2009. At the start of the 2009 flu season, parts of Canada had chosen the wrong strain to vaccinate with. It was quickly remedied, and parts of Canada never used it, but those who had gotten that vaccine were more likely to be hospitalized. The Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, which is a dog, I didn't know that, I had to look that up. It's one that has droopy long ears on both sides, a pretty small face, and from all the pictures I've seen, they're all long-haired, not short-haired, but maybe there are short-haired ones too. Anyway, those dogs, have been inbred to the point where 70% show signs of syringomelia, which is a condition when its skull is too small for its brain. As its brain grows, the pressure on it causes extreme distress and pain, and they flop around looking like they're having a seizure until the vet drills a hole in its skull to release the pressure. Also, bulldogs can only give birth via a C-section because their heads are too big for their mom's hips, and pugs are struggling to breathe their whole lives. The OP on this one also reminded people to get dogs from a shelter and not a breeder. Almost every human on Earth is a host to some type of parasite. A dentist in China was once executed for comparing mangoes to a sweet potato. I tried digging through to see if there was any context on this, and the best thing I found was because Mao received a gift from Pakistan of a bunch of mangoes, loved them, and then made them a symbol of the Communist Party for a while. So for a dentist to compare something rather foreign to something he knew better, a sweet potato, to something so plebeian was considered an offense to the Communist Party. The male anglerfish fuses into the female until there is basically nothing left of him, all for the sake of reproduction. Sounds like a toxic relationship there. It also kind of reminds me of the praying mantis who, after mating, the female kills and consumes the male. But going back to the anglerfish, apparently for a long time scientists didn't believe there even were male anglerfish because they could never find them. The Japanese giant hornet's venom is so powerful that it can actually dissolve human flesh. That also sounds horrifying. Genetic diversity in lions and cheetahs is so poor that a single epidemic would wipe them out in a few months. If you have two pregnant cows that give birth at the same time and one of the cow calf dies and the other mother cow dies, leaving her calf orphaned, you can skin the dead calf and drape it over the skin of the living calf. Then the living mother will believe the orphan calf is hers by smell and pattern of the skin and feed the calf, keeping it alive. If you get a roach infestation bad enough, the roaches will eat your skin while you sleep. They will also crawl into your ear, which is a horrible experience. To which somebody commented that it sounds like it's coming from experience, him saying it's a horrible thing, and the OP replies, unfortunately it is. He describes a scenario where if you have neighbors and those neighbors are all slobs and they have tons of roaches in their house, but for some reason they get evicted, so all the stuff gets taken out of their apartment, all the roaches that live there will travel, so they will come to the nearest place that has people. That is how you can end up with a horrible infestation. Bad enough that the roaches will chew through plastic wrap on crackers, bread, etc. just to get to the food. You know how roaches scurry when a light comes on? Well, if you get enough of them, they won't do that. And then he shows a picture that I'm not going to show here because it's very disgusting of cockroach bite marks He described the roach crawling into his ear while he slept, saying that he tried flushing them out with peroxide, but the way that it feels, the best he can describe, is imagining the noise of nails on a chalkboard, the feeling of steel wool against your teeth, and the feeling of sand in your butt. Roll into a ball and put that against your eardrum. The reason you shouldn't eat raw cookie dough isn't because of getting sick from raw eggs. You're pretty unlikely to get sick from eating raw eggs, according to this. The real reason is because you shouldn't eat raw flour, as it contains fecal matter from all of the birds that pooped on the wheat while it was growing in the field, and there's practically no way to remove it during processing. This one about dogs, I feel like I've heard so many times at this point, but in case you don't know it, the reason why dogs love squeaky toys is because it sounds like a tiny animal dying. On Mount Everest, there is a literal mountain of poop and trash because once it freezes to the mountain, it becomes a part of the mountain. And people won't stop coming in droves to Mount Everest, so it continues to grow. And also, I'm guessing that because it's so cold, nothing can really decompose, if I had to guess. You can shrink a head by sewing the eyes and mouth shut, as well as closing any other openings, and then filling the head with hot sand in order for it to shrink. There's obviously a lot more to the process of head shrinking, but that's kind of like the 101 version. Let me know which not so fun fact you like the most and leave your own down below in the comments. Drop a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel.